though. So I barely ever meet anyone who knows that city. So that's cool.
Alrighty, so 11:05, you guys ready to get started? Well, firstly, thank you everyone for joining us today. If you have noticed, Nini is filling in for Caroline Melli. Caroline Melli, we were speaking this morning, she has no voice. She's come down with a horrible illness. However, Nini has so graciously decided to join in. She has been a little bit of a sponsor for us in this last few events, and we're happy to have her on to talk about her experience planning virtual events and in-person events. And that's why we're all here today. At the very core of what we do is human connection. Every event you've ever attended, whether it's a professional event, a social event, we're all trying to connect with each other. Whether the label might be retreats or offsites or conferences, I do believe all these words are very synonymous because the core is the same. The question is, what is the intention behind these events? And what is the purpose of bringing people together? And that's what we're going to dive into today as we talk more about event planning and the art and the science that is putting these things together. Curating the right guests, setting the scene for the purpose, the intention we decided is appropriate, building the experience that brings people together or inspires ideas. There's a lot of value in what we do, and I'm very excited to have our panelists here today. Joining us, Nini Fritz, of course, the founder of the Work Happiness Project. Darcy Boles, she's a top 50 future of work speaker on LinkedIn, thought leader, author, all that fun stuff. And of course, Mr. Jay Gullifer joining us again to talk a little bit more about his new project. He is a leadership strategist, DEI trainer, and an executive coach. So welcome, everybody. Thank you for joining.
Thanks, Matt.
Yeah.
What I'll do here is I'll give you guys each a few minutes to introduce yourselves, talk about your work, your experience in this space, and then we'll dive into some questions, take some questions from the audience, and keep things rolling. Sound good?
Excellent.
Cool. So Nini, why don't you kick us off and tell us a little bit more about what you do and your background?
All right. So thanks for the introduction. Hello, everyone all around the world. The new Caroline with a voice today. I'm Nini. I connect people for a living. That's what I do. So I founded an icebreaker digital detox game called iConnect, Stronger Than Wi-Fi, meant to get people off their phones and talk to each other in the offline world. And I'm also the founder of the Work Happiness Project. That's what I'm here today. And that is a team building platform for basically connecting remote teams. And the intention behind this to help people to work from anywhere and still feel connected to everyone in their team, because I believe that freedom should not have to come at the sacrifice of loneliness. So it's either freedom or human connections. I believe that we can bring our best selves to work when we live in an environment that actually helps us to thrive and to show up as our best selves. So I created a bunch of very holistic workshops that help remote employees to feel like supercharged from the inside out. So all my workshops are based on 3 core pillars, and they are live fuller, connect deeper, and be happier. Because I truly believe when we're happy from inside, we can actually, bring our best selves to work and be a better team member and be a better employee for our company.
Amazing. Thank you again for joining such a last minute like that. I love putting people on the spot, and you're definitely on the spot here. So, Darcy, why don't you go ahead and go next?
Hi, everybody. Super stoked you all are here. I'm Darcy. I live in San Diego. It's my home base. I am a previous head of remote for the last 5 years. So pre-pandemic for a fully remote company called TaxJar, and then most recently at the payment platform company Stripe. And I got my start kind of in the tech world at Airbnb for 4 years. So experience in events is near and dear to my heart. What I do now is I do remote culture consulting for companies. So whether that's in the capacity of fractional head of remote or really helping companies understand we have a culture, but what is it and how do we write it down so we help people assimilate faster in a remote environment when we're not together the majority of the time. So that's a little bit of about what I do. Similar to Nini, my deepest why is that work doesn't have to suck. I get really angry when it does. And so a lot of my consulting is like, why are you doing it this way? Are we doing things this way because we've always done them this way? Or could we shift maybe to a more holistic, happier, and eudaimonic environment?
Amazing. So happy to have you on. Darcy is a wealth of knowledge. We've only had a few conversations, and I can tell you she's definitely the person to talk to about company culture and things like that, especially in remote world. Jay, we know Jay. We met him last time, but if you haven't met him before, we're very happy he's joining us again. Go ahead and tell us about your new project. I'm very curious to learn more about that.
Hello, everyone. My name is Jay Guilford. I'm founder and managing partner of CoWorks Leadership Strategist. I got my start in events back long ago in a land far, far away when I ran away with Cirque du Soleil. So at Cirque, I spent 6 years designing and delivering Cirque du Soleil's corporate leadership training program for targeting really Fortune 500 companies. And so what was interesting about that, and I'll tell the story later, is that I failed the first few times that I did it. And I'm here to discuss, to talk about my failures and to discuss why you should definitely choreograph those events. And I agree with what Nini said and what Darcy said. I think that people go to work and they think that, oh, this is something I have to do for money. But at CoWorks Leadership Strategist now and at Cirque, part of my mission has always been to make work fun. I really enjoy what I do. Currently, what we do is that we plan virtual and in-person trainings, DEI, leadership, a lot of other stuff. We do behavioral assessments. And after the trainings, people are surprised to say that they're fun. So I agree with Nini, I agree with Darcy, work should be engaging and fun, and these events should not just be forced fun, they should actually be exciting. So to help you understand that, I'm gonna share some ways that I failed and some things that you definitely shouldn't do. And then I guess I know we're all gonna share some ways to succeed in the virtual and in-person event world.
Wonderful. Thank you so much again, Jay, for joining us once again. Before we dive into our questions, I do have to acknowledge our sponsors. They've been helping us get all this together with our designs and our spreading the word. But while I go through this, I'm going to launch a poll. So you guys should see some questions pop up on your screen. And we're curious to know, right now, how often do you host or attend virtual events? How often do you host or attend in-person events? And generally, what is the purpose of these events you host or attend? What's the motivation for these right now? So go ahead and answer those questions. I'll go ahead and give a shout out to our good old friends, Citizen Remote. They are your home during life on the road, from their extensive resources on digital nomad visas to their new app aimed at helping you make the most of your remote lifestyle. Citizen Remote is here to help you build your borderless world. And of course, our good friends over at Group Greeting. They are an employee appreciation company. Nearly 95% of Fortune 500 companies use Group Greeting to send their e-cards, which are perfect for a remote work environment. All members of a team can sign cards regardless of location and send to employees for thank yous, birthdays, special occasions, things of that may matter. If you use promo code Nomadic6, you'll get 50% off single cards for all new customers. So go ahead and take advantage of that. And we'll move on from there. Thanks again, guys. If you're watching Group Greeting, Citizen Group, Brian, Tim, you guys are great. Love you both. So what do we got here? Let's see our results. So it looks like once per month is the average virtual event, while twice per year is the average in-person event. Very interesting. It's about what I would say it sounds about right. Right, guys? That's kind of what I've seen before. And the number one reason people host these events is for bonding and team development, camaraderie, human connection. It's good to see that. It's good to see that we're in the right space and we have the right ideas here, right? So, you guys ready to dive into some questions? Cool. So, the first question that's on everyone's mind, what is the importance of event planning, especially during recession economies like the one we're in right now? This is for everyone. Jay, do you want to start us off?
Oh, yeah. It's interesting because working with a lot of clients, what is top of mind is budget, and that's really important. What the research shows, and that's where I go when I'm talking to people, is that virtual and in-person events are important because even though we're in a recession economy, we're also within the great quit and the war for talent. And these events, when they're planned well, they can increase employee engagement. And for companies, especially, they can bolster your talent brand. So those are two reasons if you want to look at it from a business wise, like, okay, these can be gratuitous and fun. And maybe in a recession, I should cut them, but think about the long-term consequences of that when you're trying to post to your talent board to show what you're doing. And other companies have these great in-person events or virtual events and you don't, people are going to make that choice. And when they're working virtually, they can just click off of your website and apply to another job. And the other important part of it for those events is that you release oxytocin. And that's the part where you bond with other people. And especially for live events, you should do both virtual and in-person. And especially for live events, you produce 20% more oxytocin. And that's that bonding element that you don't necessarily get virtually. So I don't want to say virtual or in-person events are one is better than the other. You should definitely do both. But the reason why you want to have both in your arsenal, there's a business why in terms of talent, brand, and surviving the great quit and this war for talent. And also it helps people bond. And there's real science behind that in terms of our endorphins and hormones and what we release. So those are some reasons for me.
Absolutely.
I can second that as well. I mean, I'm not going to say too much different than what Jay said, but trust is really the glue that bonds your remote team, no matter the distance between them. And I would say that just like Jay said, there is a significant ROI in getting people together. There is a significant business result when people are connected and engaged. And not to say that you can't do this virtually, but really thinking about spending that synchronous time together. Companies can be from 18 to 25% more productive, more profitable. And so really taking that amount of time and money to organize something like this, you will see results in the end. You will see higher retention rates. You will see more engagement. So it can be really easy to say, this is play. This is something that's on the side. We actually research also shows us how important play is in a workplace. It's not just fun, but really engaging, playing, being creative with one another, and bonding is a significant thing to get a very, very strong, profitable and strong business result.
I could not agree more. I just basically can replicate what Jay and Darcy just said, but I read the layoff letter that Mark Zuckerberg published, and he basically mentioned that, the number one thing that they cut off was perks, which is kind of, when they cut their budget, it means the fun and team building is being cut out, which I personally think is I'm big on culture first, people first. It's the worst thing to do, because if you want to make sure that the remaining talent in your company, which is then considered the top talent, because they have not been laid off and they stay with the company, is motivated and you actually want to keep them engaged, that's your best investment. That's the one thing you should go for, is making sure they're in a good mood. You actually create this super glue that bonds them as a team, which is more important than ever before, because in the end, it's people, they leave toxic work environments, they leave bad leaders and draining company cultures. But if they have a friend at work, they're actually 7 times more likely to stay with the company. If they have a friend, if they have a close person in their office setting. So this is the number one thing you should invest in, because it's an investment in your people, in your team. It's a direct investment in the bottom line of your company. So yeah. Couldn't agree more.
I'd build on that too and say something we found in our research is the friend work relationship, builds better feedback. That you ask your friends for feedback on your work. You get more opportunity in your jobs. There's a lot of correlation between job satisfaction and work friends. So I think that's a very interesting thing we've seen since the pandemic. Is this almost lack of friendship being developed amongst remote teams? So moving into our next question, this is for you, Darcy. How often would you recommend companies host either virtual or in-person events to kind of help facilitate all that we're speaking about here?
So I think, I'm going to have 2 answers to this. One, I think, I would say no less than 2 times a year and no more than 4 for in-person. I think it's really important if you're a remote first company. The more that people say come to the office once a month or do all of these things, the more you start to become a hybrid company, which is fine. But I think the other part of this is defining how many events you're going to have. This sort of, we're going to have a happy hour next week, or we're going to go in person in the fall, and we're just going to throw all these things out there, can actually really make your employees feel confused, ungrounded, and they can't plan their lives around it. So the biggest piece of advice I have for whether you're going to have 4 events a year in person and 1 a month or whatever it may be, is make that decision now and stick with it and create a ritual around it. Cultures are held together by shared rituals. And the more that you can create and codify those rituals, the more that people will engage, expect, and really prepare themselves to be involved. So it's not exactly answering the question, because I think it's really dependent on your culture. It's dependent on how synchronous you have decided you want to be as a culture, how much trust you have, how large your company is. And there is no rule of thumb for that. But making the decision and then building around that is the number one piece of advice I can give there.
Love it. Yeah, have a plan and execute. I think that's the best way to do with it. I've seen a lot of companies that do set aside intentional time. They say next month we're going to do a quarterly meetup. They don't really have a goal for that meetup. They just know that they're going to do it. So I think the further in advance you plan these things, whether it is once a year, twice a year, the more impactful it's going to be. I completely agree. Any other thoughts before we move on?
Yeah, I actually agree. And I would say I recently wrote an article on LinkedIn about it, that a positive and uplifting corporate culture, remote culture, is basically like a healthy long distance relationship. So you actually really need to plan like conscious quality time together, and like really see it as like like a quality investment in your time. And I actually like level it into like 3 different levels of how you can connect your team in a virtual setting. So it's based on the 3 C's. So care is really like caring about the individual, like offering them like mental health support and like doing all that in the virtual setting. Second one is connect, like really making sure you have like conscious non-work related time that you help your team to connect in the virtual setting. So set up virtual lunch, set up like virtual coffee breaks, and make sure they can actually build this super glue that bonds them. And it's not just on a Zoom call where everyone is like being on mute and turns off the camera until the second the meeting starts, and then all you talk about is work. Like you miss out on these, I call them like water cooler chats in the remote world, like in the online setting. So therefore it's really important to kind of find like a substitute to then like nourish and build a healthy corporate culture online. And the third one is community. Like Darcy said, like host and plan them like way ahead so everybody knows when they should schedule them in their calendar, especially when the company is working async, to make sure people can still build their work around their life and not a life around work. But I think like once a month for like a proper team meeting online, I think it's the right dose.
So Jay, I'm curious, from your experience with Cirque and all your wonderful adventures through life, what are the key elements of event planning, and what are the stages that go into that process?
Oh, good. And I can tell you, this is where I can tell you how I failed. This is how I know. So let me tell you the story of the failure first. So when I was at Cirque, we were just like, oh, we're Cirque du Soleil, Fortune 500s, come do things with us. And they said yes. And we got a Fortune 100 company, and they came and we said, oh, we'll just throw them into, I said this, not we, it was me. I said, we'll just throw them into the theater, do a tech display, it's going to be fine. It was not fine. Because, if you've been to Vegas, you know that to walk from the parking lot to a theater can take you 15 or 20 minutes. And then it just was not fine for a number of reasons. They were disengaged. We didn't have any choreography or planning around it. And they were executives. They were the top level executives at this company. And we got really horrible reviews. So then since then, we regrouped, and I learned from that very tragic experience. And here are the 6 steps that I would say, and these are not exact, but these are the steps that I take. The first, you want to gather the information about what the stakeholders, what the participants want from the event. And that's really important, because what we've seen in our work, we work with a lot of companies, and a lot of times the planner or the HR person or the executive knows what they want, but they haven't surveyed the participants. So you want to gather the information. Then you want to create an agenda, and then you want to detail out and timestamps, like this is going to happen for 5 minutes, this is for 15, this is for 30. I can share some of our agendas, and they're definitely timestamps. So even when we're selling into organizations, they know what's going to happen at one moment to the next. And then you want to gather the necessary materials. Now, where I've seen organizations fail and where you can definitely succeed in a virtual meeting is that you want to gather those materials. If you're using a Jamboard, or if you're pushing them out to a Mentimeter, any of those things, you want to have all of the virtual materials in place. If you're going to drop in worksheets, any of those things you want to gather. And definitely for an in-person event, you want to gather all of the physical materials. The biggest part for me is the choreography in live and in-person events. But let's talk about virtual, because most of us kind of have it kind of down in in-person events, but virtually you want to practice facilitating the event. You want to have a practice session. You want to say, who's going to speak when am I going to hand it off to the panelists? When am I going to send people out to the Jamboard? When am I going to bring them back? Am I going to use the breakout rooms? And am I going to broadcast into those rooms? All of those little things can make or break the event. And what we've seen is that when it goes well, no one notices it. But when it doesn't go well and it's clunky getting them back from the breakouts, or you don't know where the worksheets are, it can be a disaster. So you want to gather the information, create an agenda, gather the materials, choreograph. Then you want to execute, do all the things you practice. Then afterwards, two most important steps: survey the participants to see how they felt about the events. That can be painful sometimes. We didn't necessarily need to survey the Fortune 100 company at CERT because they walked out. So we were sure that they did not enjoy it. It was 100%. They did not enjoy it, and we knew exactly why. So you want to take those survey results and that learning for the same event if you're going to syndicate it, and for future events. I have that written down somewhere. So if you reach out to me, I can send that to you. I have just a short list of 6 things. Just gather the information, create an agenda, gather the materials, choreograph, execute, survey, learn from the survey, and then revise.
I can color that in a little bit too, and that's all incredible advice. I think one of the things you're talking about too is when I think about in both in-person and virtual, it's architecture and shared reality. And even when if you're going into, and a lot of what Jay is talking about is architecting the environment virtually. Like you actually have to build a space and a container where people understand where to go and where to flow. And every nuance, even saying to people, it's okay to turn your camera off and answer the door or go to the bathroom, you have to say those things. And it sounds wild because we're working with adults, but some people, all of your remote people, whether they're in person or virtual, actually have no shared reality. They're living in different experiences from different cultures. You have to tell them how to behave and what's accepted and what's not. And when you're thinking about an in-person event as well, similar to what Jay was saying for virtual, look at the architecture of the building. Are there places where people are naturally going to gather with one another? Make sure not to go into a bungalow hotel where people can go and hide. Organize long brunch lines where people are forced to talk to one another. So really thinking about these tiny little nuances that you might not have thought about before, and thinking about both in-person and virtual, how you think about those nuances for every moment of connection.
Darcy, I think we have a new phrase: choreography and architecture.
Love that.
The title of our book we're writing together immediately after this.
Love it. And Jay, you said it perfectly. It's when things go smoothly, nobody really notices. They think that this is how everything's supposed to be. And so when things go out of hand, everybody has a comment about it. So it's always the choreography and the rehearsal is spot on. I can speak from that experience as well, but I won't talk about my failures necessarily. So let's move on to our next little question here. So Darcy, what are the advantages and disadvantages of virtual events, would you say?
Well, I'll also share a massive failure. So I've planned 5 fully remote team on-sites in person and 4 fully remote team virtual off-sites. And the first time I did my virtual offsite, and this is not just like a monthly thing, like a 3-day kind of, we're going to have a offsite, was at the start of the pandemic. And what I did was I lifted and shifted the in-person experience virtually. Y'all, it doesn't work. We know it doesn't work. And I found out it didn't work very easily. Zoom fatigue, just people feeling exhausted. They want to spend time with their family. They're not having to travel. So never lift and shift, first rule. But But I really think one of the advantages of doing a virtual event is the fact that you don't have that travel time. It is less expensive. You can really think about these moments in person. And I'm sorry, these moments where people are at home, you can bring their family into it. We've done everything from a kids talent show on the middle of the day, like, great, have your kids come in. Each kid has 10 minutes. We'll do a talent show. And you can really bring in people's friends and family, or cooking classes where one employee actually teaches everybody how to make something in their own kitchen. And so really thinking about bringing people's homes into the environment with who's ever comfortable. Of course, sometimes that's not a comfortable thing for people. So really learning, who wants to be involved and who doesn't. So I think there's just a lot more element of bringing that human to work, which is really, really cool in virtual events. One of the disadvantages I would definitely say is that fact of you don't get to kind of touch and feel and have those moments of just kind of spontaneity in those hallway moments. And that I really, truly don't think can be replaced with a virtual event. That's why I do think getting together in person is really important, but you can cover, I would say, a lot of 75% of those synchronous bonding moments in a virtual event. It's just all about how you architect and choreograph it.
And I would add to that, that's so great, Darcy. And I would add to that, this is something you miss. Can anyone see what's in my hand? No, you can't because we are virtual. And that is the point. So I think technology is part of the answer. What Darcy explains, and I think is great, is like, you can do many more things. Like, you don't have to bring everyone into the kitchen to have one employee teach them how to cook, or you can bring the whole company virtually. What you miss and what the studies show is that you miss other learners, the kinesthetic tactile learners. You miss the person grabbing something and using a pen and a marker to display something. You miss the whiteboard, so there's a lot of things that you miss. So I would say one doesn't replace the other. You kind of have to do both. Studies have shown that what's challenging about the virtual events is that we're in this square box, and that's our shared environment. So our divergent thinking is limited to the box, whereas when we're in person, we're looking at different things and we're getting ideas from what's in the shared architecture of the building. So those are the two words. So it's interesting where I rail, and I'm very passionate about this, where companies think that virtual reality is the answer and they never have to gather again. You're missing a lot of learners who learn kinesthetically. You're missing the exchange of ideas. What we've seen is that people don't want to work virtually, so they're not going to type out 3 paragraphs, or they're not going to necessarily type in the chat, or they're not going to necessarily unmute their mics, but in person. So you kind of have to balance both. I agree with Darcy. Two are better than one. Both are better than nothing. Yeah.
I think we just lost Nini. I don't know. So Nini's in Bali, and who knows what's going on at almost midnight there. Hopefully she joins us back here in a second. But moving straight ahead, so I'm curious, Jay, kind of continuing that thought, what would you say are some things that organizations generally overlook when they're planning their events?
What do they overlook? I would say one, the types of learners, but I think most important, I've seen organizations say, well, the team members weren't engaged. But I would say you have to get the information about what engages them. One thing that we've been working on and talking about is forced fun. So getting the information from the people who will participate about how they want to participate and what they want to participate in. So we've all seen people shuttle us off to locked rooms, and that can be fun, but it can be stress inducing or anxiety making for some people. So I would say getting the information about what the stakeholders want and about what the participants want, that's like a big miss for me. And so gathering that information before you go further down the road and you plan things and you book hotels and you find out like, people weren't really necessarily interested in that.
And I'll say I am consistently surprised about the lack of communication for events running up to them. I think one of the nuances that happens in fully remote teams, or those who really, really love the autonomy of their remote life, is there's actually a lot of people who have never been on a plane before. There are people that this might be really, really stressful for them because they're leaving their kids at home. They're actually taking time out of their day. They've chosen to work remotely for a lot of reasons that are really near and dear to their intrinsic motivation. And so really walking and holding people's hands to that process, everything through 4 months before the event saying, okay, do you know you need real ID next year or a passport to travel in the United States? Here's an example of how to go through TSA in an airport. Here's how you can get from point A to point B. Here's how we're going to reimburse you for those things. Money's a big thing for a lot of people in your company. They might be scared about reimbursement or fronting costs. So thinking about all of these moments and all of the breadth of the experience of the people that are coming, again, there are no shared assumptions, and you may be having an event with 15 out of 100 people that have never been to a work event before. And so again, that communication, that nuanced communication, I would say run it like you would do a Sesame Street episode. That might sound childish, but the more information that you can give, the more nuanced information you can give, the more permission you can give for people to be human is huge.
And can I add to that? You said Sesame Street, Darcy. And I was just going to say edutainment. The other thing, and I know we've all seen it, and Matt, I told you, you do a great job of this. You're engaging and entertaining as a host. I have seen where you have a great event or you have a great virtual event or even trainings. We do a lot of trainings, and the host that you choose may not necessarily understand that they're also there to entertain. So there's a high level of energy you have to have. What we know on Zoom or any virtual event, that as a speaker, it can suck away 30% of your energy. So when you're presenting, you think you're sounding like this, but Zoom takes it down to about this. So just as important is to choose the host or hosts in that event who can engage the audience. That's especially important virtually.
Absolutely. And I'd say just going to choreography and architecture, the reason why we even do the events like this, the 4-person gallery view, so everyone can kind of see each other talking. I'm not talking more than I need to because I don't want to be the monologuer. Nobody notices this until you mess up. But yeah, exactly. Spot on. Nini, thank you for joining us again. We thought we lost you for the night.
Talking about messing up and like nobody notices until you mess it up. I think
Exactly.
that was just a striking example of how technology can also be a curse at times and just kick you out. But thanks for your patience. I'm back.
I would say it is always refreshing. Even the big companies, when they have tech problems or calls drop, it's humbling to know that we're all still trying to figure this out. The fact that we have the opportunity to talk across 12-hour time difference in this manner is amazing. So we should appreciate what we have, right? So now that you're back, I'm going to get this next question to you. What are the key elements in the events that you plan, and specifically, what is the process you think about when you're putting together your workshops and your events like that?
Yeah, well, for me, it's always super important that I feel like there's no one-fits-all solution, especially when it comes to team building. So it's really important to kind of really like fine-tune it to make sure it's like based on their needs. It's like what is currently the biggest challenge they're facing as a remote team, and then really try to find like a solution that works best for the challenge that they're facing. As I mentioned earlier, that my workshops are based on like live fuller, connect deeper, and be happier. And then, for instance, for the live fuller, I have like a bucket list workshop, and then we really try to figure out like what is it that's holding them back? What is it that they're not living it? And there's one standpoint from the person who organizes the event, but it's really important, as Darcy also mentioned before, and Jay as well, is like, go down to the team, run a survey, run a poll, like what is their need? What are they trying to get out of the session? And then work around that, and don't think that you have the solution and then try to fit it onto their problem. Work the other way around. And yeah, for me, it's also super important to humanize the experience, to really like humanize this digital work environment and facilitate it as if you would facilitate like an in-person event. So try to bring all possible aspects to it, like make sure they're feeling comfy, order them like a snack package at Snack Nation, or cover like a virtual coffee for them, like really bring in all the aspects that make sure they feel like well taken care of. They're feeling like seen and heard as an individual, and not just like a human doing in the business, but actually like a human being, and yeah, feeling seen, feeling heard. And then of course, like always check the systems in place and check like whether they want to facilitate a sync event or is it async? Like how many people do we have on board? Do we want to have it all in one session or is it going to be in breakout rooms? Depending on like the level of engagement they're trying to get out of it. So really like figure out what their needs are and then adjust it accordingly, I would say.
I'll plug the same book I plug on every panel. You know, The Art of Gathering is the Bible of event planning. And the big point there is intention. What is the intention of this event, right? And really dive down. Why are we doing this? You know, what is this? So absolutely.
I think
Good. Go, Darcy.
Sorry, Nini. I was going to say a good framework for that is just asking yourself before the event, after asking your team what they want, is what do you, after knowing that, what do you want people to say, feel, think, and do? And if you can answer all of those questions, you can architect around it.
Yeah. Amen.
So Darcy, to you now, what are the benefits of working with, you know, people like us, not trying to plug ourselves here by any means, but, you know, why don't companies just DIY, do it yourself? You know, what is it about our industry and what we do that is worth, you know, our time and effort?
Well, I mean, I'd say for me, I am not a super detailed oriented person. I am somebody who I kind of think of the vision, the culture, how I want it to be infused. But if you ask me to negotiate a contract and force majeure, like I'm dead. Like I'm terrible at it. So I think, you know, one of those things is really about the skill sets on your team. And for a lot of smaller teams, one of the you know, opportunities. And one of the things that a lot of people teams are bogged down with is that event planning becomes an additional job on top of all of the roles that these people's already have. And they're holding so much space for so much else. And so having an event planner, especially an event planner that is able to understand the culture of the company, is something that I think is really, really, really powerful. So if I could tell an event planner, this is what I want people to say, feel, think, and do, these are our values, help me infuse that by executing this vision. And I think that's really where you should be looking at to event planners for. Event planners are not going to immediately know your culture. It's your responsibility to translate that culture and then really sort of oversee along the way that kind of implicit stuff is being felt explicitly. So I really love using event planners for the research process, for the execution process, for the contract negotiation process, for the more tactical things that really are busy work for somebody who is managing an event planning hat on top of everything else that they're doing. But I really do think that event planning hat, you should still be utilizing yourself and your knowledge and your team to understand what emotions people feel. So then you can translate that to the event planner to execute an environment where those emotions are felt and that culture is felt.
A+.
And I would add to that, you get the pattern recognition. So what we do at CoWorks is mostly team building and training. So for us, you can get something plug and play, and it's all original. And at the same time, for anyone on the panel who's done events, like we've worked with Microsoft, MasterCard, Google, Adobe, we've been a small part of change in those very large organizations. I don't want to say I deliver some big grand thing for Google, but we've worked with a lot of organizations. Everyone on the panel has. And if you hire someone from the outside, as Darcy said, first of all, it lifts it from HR. They have a lot of other things to do in terms of compliance and culture inside of the organization. And secondly, you just get the pattern recognition that you gain from having worked with organizations, having succeeded, and all of us having failed. So it's like when you hire anyone from the outside, if they have a resume that you're looking for, they can say, oh, you don't want to do that, you want to do this. And hopefully, as I know Darcy has and Nini has and Nomadic 6 has, you get all original content. No one's going to stand you in a circle and have you toss a ball and say your name. So you're going to get all original content. It's going to be that it will be engaging, and you're going to get the pattern recognition so you can avoid some of those mistakes.
100%. And I also think, if you're like a head of remote, a head of culture, as you two already mentioned, it's like you have a full-time job taking care of all these things, and like event planning is a fraction of your job position. But if you get like an external event planner on board, like their job is literally like spending all day researching like the latest platforms of like, how can we create like cool, engaging content? How can we boost the company culture? What are maybe some cool, engaging platforms like Gather, Bubbler, Snack Nation, whatever that we can like use as an add-on for the virtual experience. Like this is what we're spending at least like 40 hours a week on doing like all day long. And it's not just a fraction. So it's like actually, money invested in your own peace of mind to get someone on board who just has this expert a level of experience and knowledge, and you can just like lean back, relax, knowing someone else is taking care of that, who's doing that like full time.
And Nini, what that brought up for me is like, I have this philosophy that I have a dream of a world where everybody at work is working in their zone of genius, in their strength, in that space of like energy and fulfillment. And if you're not an event planner, you're not going to be able to plan the most incredible event for your team and get the ROI that y'all are spending a lot of money on. And so again, that little bit of investment is hire somebody who that is their zone of genius, stay in your zone of genius, and be able to collaborate with that person in a way that's fulfilling for everybody.
Did we lose Matt Young?
I think we might have lost Matt.
That's still with us.
Who's taking it away, y'all?
I will take it away then. So this is an example of that. So can we share? Let's start with sharing stories about the most successful event that we've had. Darcy and then Nini. What's the most? Because we talked about the failures. I failed at Cirque du Soleil. Darcy failed with the lift and shift. So what's been the most successful event that you've produced?
Darcy, you want to start?
I can start. So I think the most successful event I produced was the second event I produced for the fully remote company I was working for. And it was in February. So it was during a time where a lot of people are in winter. They're kind of feeling in the darkness, at least in the US. So we didn't have any Southern Hemisphere employees at the time. And so I actually chose Palm Springs as the event destination, and really wanted people to bond and have fun, be in the sunshine. And that just environment in and of itself produced a lot of that connection. People were able to go on walks. People were able to be in the sunshine. And so that was something that was really, really, really powerful. I think another part of that, what made it so successful, was really bringing in the city that we went to. So, and that's something that I really tend on doing. A lot of the most successful offsites that I've thrown have been in smaller cities with international airports. Palm Springs, Savannah, Georgia, Nashville, Austin, really thinking about, again, coming back to this kind of introvert piece that I was talking about, people who haven't traveled a lot before. Flying into New York City and LA is really overwhelming for a lot of people. So you really trying to pick these cities that have their own culture, that have their own identity, and then building around that. We did a game night in a 70s hotel, and everything was super Palm Springs 70s, bright colors, bringing people in, bringing the culture in to the event is really where I see the most success. And again, you're paying for people to go to an event, help them experience a new place. And that can be another thing that people get really excited about. They're like, wow, I really got out of my comfort zone. I went on a hike. I'm not a hiker. And helping people kind of really achieve these tiny challenges that they might have for themselves in a place that you're bringing people together. And one of the other most successful things I'll say that made this event successful is, Nini, we actually did a bucket list workshop with Ben Nempton, who is, so if y'all don't know Ben Nempton, he's a great keynote speaker. We brought him in for our holiday present, and everybody wrote down their bucket list. And so one of the things we did at the offsite was we took some of the bucket list items that people had and then worked together to cross those off as cross-team collaboration. And that was just absolutely incredible. So again, bringing things in from virtual events that you've had into these in-person events and really starting to see that red thread. Can we take what we learned in the last virtual event? Can it show up in the in-person event, and vice versa? So the more you do it, the more you'll see those patterns, the more you'll see the energy come from it. And I'll shut up now, but that's really kind of the few elements that I think made that event so successful.
I want to go to that. I want to go to that. Nini, your most successful event or even moment?
Yeah, well, actually, I'm just taking over where Darcy left off. I had like a beautiful virtual event. I threw a Christmas party for a team from like Facebook, Meta, whatever you want to call them, last year. And it was actually the bucket list workshop, which is probably like my most popular workshop for reasons that Darcy just mentioned. And to quickly give you a background of the workshop, it's basically like a 12-step holistic blueprint. So in the first part, we talk about why people didn't know they needed a bucket list until they had one, and why it's so important to kind of live a life true to ourselves and basically combine our professional goals to our personal goals, to use it as incentives. So the company knows like what ignites the fire for my team on a personal level. So then they can say like, well, if you reach your KPI this month, we're going to cover your helicopter flight over the Grand Canyon. And then really, of course, like helping them to figure out what is it that makes me happy, that gets me, that makes my eyes shine, that triggers my inner smile. And then, of course, helping the team to connect with each other, like team up accountability buddies, help them to like get to know each other as a team. And yeah, just really like figure out what maybe shared interests they have with a colleague they've never talked to. And we have this 12-step blueprint. So it's an acronym, My Bucket List. So for every letter, they have one specific category, like T is taking lessons, K is kindness for others, and they get 50 suggestions for everything. So basically everyone's creating their own personal bucket list. And in the end, we have this action taking session. So with Facebook, it was just above and beyond, because you can imagine like a company culture at Facebook, at least back then, was like similar to Google, that you have to have some sort of like craziness to actually be accepted at Facebook. So it brings in like a very, very uplifting corporate culture by nature. So they only hire people who have this like kind of extra spark, of extra like special spark inside of them. So we came to the action taking session, and that was just above and beyond. So it was 5 minutes of countdown to break one of the goals down to tangible action bites. I have people booking flights in 5 minutes, people like buying concert tickets, people like sending messages to like a long lost friend or like a relative, how much they love them and they wanted to reconnect. And also within the team, it really like sparked this magic collaboration of people like wanting to go to concerts together, people like wanting to take like online classes together. I don't remember, I think it was like piano classes online or something. And just really like seeing how much of an effect like a 1 hour session just had for them as like individuals, and then of course as a team, and then just feeling that they got so much motivation from the inside out. You saw some like their eyes were shining at the end of the session, and it was just so intrinsically rewarding on a personal level. And then of course like the ripple effects it creates in their lives and then everyone else they encounter. So yeah, that was, I think, for me the most beautiful event and like a major success in terms of how many lives you can positively impact.
Oh, excellent. Excellent. That sounds, all of that, you need to share those resources. So be sure to put that in the chat to share the resources for those events so that people can know where to get them. So let's say you don't have Facebook or Google money and you want to plan an event and you want it to be impactful. Let's start with in person, because virtual, we kind of know how to save some money. You're planning an in-person event and you don't have that Facebook or Google money, but you want it to be impactful. What can we do? You can either give some general guidelines or a specific example.
Yeah, I mean, I'll use a psychological theory that was developed by Ryan and Decky about 40 years ago, and it's called self-determination theory. And it's the theory that we all share 3 psychological needs universally, no matter where we're from or culture we're in, that will produce motivation and engagement if all 3 are met. Those I call them the ABCs of remote, or the ABCs of remote events: autonomy, belonging, and competency. So competency meaning learning and growth. And so really thinking about no matter where you are, what your budgets are, thinking about these three things. Are we giving people autonomy? Are we helping them feel like they belong? And are they learning and growing from one another in this event? Really, really simple framework to really check yourself on anything you're doing. And I think the other thing is really don't over-index on content. You don't need to bring in a bunch of speakers. You don't need to just watch people on a screen. You can do that on Zoom. And so thinking about, again, those moments of just working together, shoulder to shoulder, being really creative with what you have and what exists. So again, ABCs of remote: autonomy, belonging, and competency. Check yourself on that framework when you're building those events.
Thank you. That's a great framework. Autonomy, belonging, and competency. ABC. Got it. So if I can repeat it, then you've taught it. Nini, what about you? Low budget. What should people I shouldn't say low budget, not necessarily Facebook or Google budget. What should people do? What can they do for in-person events?
I have a similar approach, and there's like care, connect, and community that I mentioned earlier. But I think also when it comes to in-person event, it's just, again, coming back to having like a powerful why. You know, if you have like a clear intention of bringing your team together, it doesn't have to cost a fortune. Like, it really is more about, coming up with creative ideas that really address a specific need for them, for your team, and try to solve it. And I like find a facilitator, and like, don't want to toot my own horn, but I feel like a company has like great values, and it's like a startup that I personally feel like they're really positively impacting the world. Honestly, I'm telling them, like, tell me the budget that you got, and I'm happy to, build a budget around that. So I'm very purpose driven with that. And I do feel like a lot of other platforms, team facilitators out there are as well. Because in the end, like, our mission is really to meaningfully connect people and to help them to thrive from the inside out. So I do feel like if you publish that and you just address people with the right approach, you find a lot of people who are willing to help you, like on a tiny budget as well, because they believe in what you do.
Darcy, go ahead. I'm sorry, Nini, go ahead, Darcy. Yes.
Oh, I was going to say, and sometimes I remember throwing an event in Chicago. This is just a quick example. We ordered pizza from Chicago's most famous deep dish pizza place one night. Again, bring the culture in. It doesn't have to be expensive. Doesn't have to be a fancy place. We rented a pier space and had a game night over deep dish pizza. And it was probably everybody's favorite night, even over the Michelin star dinner that we fortunately had a budget for the next night. But it was actually the pizza night that got more traction. So again, think about just, what did you love doing with your friends when you were a kid? Like, what were these things that you bonded? And really coming back to this childlike creativity can be really powerful.
Yeah, go ahead, Nini. Yes, excellent.
Just very quickly, but I think authenticity is really what connects. It's not like the super fancy places. It's like when we're being human, this is the glue that bonds, when we can like let down our guards, let down our mask. And I do think, like Darcy said, like a pizza at night is probably like a more authentic and like, wouldn't say vulnerable experience, but you can just be much more yourself when you're like eating pizza, probably like wearing your favorite hoodie, instead of like doing something that is not authentically representing you. Like, you walk around in like suit and tie, like eating with your cutlery from the inside out, like, cool, that's fancy, but you kind of put on a mask, like, and then I'm like, why that circus? Just be yourself, and that's how you can like meaningfully connect with the people around you as well. So yeah, great example, Darcy. And another thing that I'm very big about, which is connected to the I Connect question game, but just ask better questions. Nobody likes small talk. Like, skip the small talk, help people to have better conversations, to get to know each other on like on a much deeper level. Like, don't talk about work. Talk about, I don't know, if you could hang out with a fictional character for a day, who would you choose? Or, stuff like that. And then really get them to talk, get them to interact. And I do believe that this is the glue that bonds.
Yeah, and I think, and I want to go back to one thing that you said, Nini, and Darcy, you can chime in on this if this is true. we do this also when a company, we work with a lot of nonprofits. So we've worked with big box brands that have, $4 zillion to do whatever they want. And then we try to work with a lot of nonprofits and B Corps. So for anyone listening, if you can be transparent about your budget, then Darcy, Nini, I, or any organization, Nomadic Six, can pull something off the shelf that fits your budget. We just had a conversation with an organization 2 days ago, and they were like, oh, we don't want to, we know. And I was like, just tell us the budget, because we can work with, if we don't know, then I'm going to suggest something ridiculous, and then we're both going to feel embarrassed. So we don't necessarily have to take you to Tiffany's every time. We can take you to Zales. They have a lot of great stuff there. So I would say for anyone listening, any event planner or team builder or facilitator who has a mission is definitely willing and able to work with your budget. And the other thing that you should know is, because a lot of organizations have things that are off the shelf. I'm sure Nini and Darcy tomorrow, if you call them and said, or Nomadic Six, let's do this, they can pull something off the shelf that fits your budget. So there's a win-win in that too. So for anyone listening, if you're not the big box brands of the world, realize that everyone's wanting to do the work. So as we continue, we are inviting questions into the chat. So please ask any questions you want. I think we have, do we have 30 more minutes for this? Yeah, so please.
Hey, am I back? Can you guys hear me?
We think you are back. Oh man, you missed the unicorns, Darcy did a magic trick.
An eagle flew down over my head.
Yeah, she disappeared. Oh, you missed it. Oh, Matt.
You thought you got killed.
I will tell you the
a fire spitting dragon, but here you are.
Can you guys see me, or am I just a voice right now?
No,
Yeah,
we can see
and hear you.
Oh my God. I live in Naples, Florida, which is, a relatively nice area, and the power just went out on the entire grid, this whole neighborhood. So Wi-Fi's out, no power, had to bootstrap my sick. It was ridiculous. So welcome to Florida, everybody. We're still recovering from Hurricane Ian. That was 2 months ago. So the grid has been under construction. So you have to forgive my absence. I hope I didn't miss anything too much, too special. Any insights, that you guys had?
Yeah. I feel you, Matt. I had it this week in Bali. There was a power cut on the whole island, and I was just remote life at its finest. So no worries.
Yeah, it's funny. We were just talking about the advantages of the technology we have at our disposal, and then the cuts out. So go figure. Generally we. Yep. Sorry, go ahead.
We'll throw it back to you.
Thanks, guys. I appreciate you filling in for me. We do have another 30 minutes on the schedule. Generally, this is where we do a Q&A from the audience. We did get a few questions ahead of time. If you guys want to, we can dive there. And if you are still with us watching, thank you for your patience, and feel free to drop any questions for the panelists while we're here. So first and foremost, what balance of fun and work should be built into an event? And we'll leave this open to all of you guys.
I'll take that one, because that's one. Our events at CoWorks Leadership Strategists are more training driven. So it's been interesting that people feel like trainings, even when they're in terms of compliance, such as DEI, they feel like it shouldn't be fun. We've all said it, and Matt, you said it: intention, intention, intention. And the primary intention is to engage the audience. So I know when you mention things like play or fun, if it's not just a team building event, or if it's something more mandatory, like a type of training, I would say if it's team building or any type of offsite for engagement, fun should be at the center. You should build it around what your attendees want and what will engage them. So play and fun are words that I use often. If it's more compliance-based, or it's about training, or about getting teams in sync towards a goal, at the center still should be engagement. So I would say at the start, even if you don't call it fun or play, you should center around every single moment. Darcy said this best, should be meant to engage that audience, no matter what it is. We use something called Enigma. So we use Enigma in our trainings, where when people walk in, we do a training and something's covered with a black cloth, and people are thinking they're engaged, because the human brain, when they don't know something, it wants to know, and then you uncover it, and it's Legos, and then we have a whole series of things we do with Legos. So whatever it is, I would say, even if you don't call it fun, I would say all of it should center around the intention to engage and delight, or engage and delight. Yeah, engage and delight the audience.
Yeah, and I'd say you're bringing people together to do things that you can't do together online for an in-person event. I think that should be your matrix when you're saying, why are we doing this event? And so whether it's fun or work, if you work super well together online, then don't work together in person, right? Obviously, there's a need for customer success teams to take care of your customers. There is a business need. And so I think really recognizing what your business needs are while people are in person together, making sure your teams are delivering together on those needs, and then balancing off of that. And that's really how you should be looking at it. And then I also think, a balance, there is no rule of thumb. I think Chase has a 50-30-20 rule, Chase Warrington over at Doist, which is really helpful. But again, that synchronous time is engagement and bonding. And I know it can be tough, especially for individuals who have been in the corporate world for a long time. It's just a pattern I see often, that want to do content work. That is a very, very common reaction to getting together. And so there is this sort of paradigm shift that we're going into. And so I would encourage those who are event planners on this call to really show the research and importance of people getting together and simply just engaging together versus just working together, if that makes sense. So that's a really, really important one. And then also, how are you energizing your team for the work ahead for the next 6 months or the next year? So whether it's a state of the union from your CEO of here's what we're all getting excited about, and that's just an hour of a 3-day event together, that can be a really, really exciting thing to do to just re-energize your team.
Yeah. I also want to quickly pick up on what Jay said about fun. I'm currently reading the book, The Power of Fun, which is very related to the importance of taking conscious downtime, conscious fun time and play time, especially in the work environment. And basically, the author states true fun as an overlap of playfulness, connection, and flow. So only when you have all 3 components overlapping in one, then you actually experience true fun, which can then be seen as an investment in your creativity and your productivity. Because if we're only in this doing state, it's like this balloon in our brain. It's just blowing up and getting bigger and bigger, and we don't have any space left in our mind to actually be creative. But when we have this conscious fun time with our team and do something that is non-outcome related, which is of course there's an ulterior motive in team building to then get your team closer together, but it's not as outcome related. It's reaching a certain KPI or whatever. So it helps you to deflate that balloon in your brain, so to speak, to then allow them to actually invest more in their creativity, in feeling the energy from the inside out again, to supercharge them and create a ripple effect into every area of their lives. And when it comes to IRL events, I would also say make sure that it's quality over quantity. I think we tend to try to squeeze out every minute of this sync time to put as much information and as much content into that, but give them time to integrate it. In an online setting, of course, it's a certain time we're being online, but even then, make sure you give them breaks. And especially in the offline setting, give them time to just integrate what they've just learned, to just flow and connect and engage in a natural way, and not this enforced way of activity after activity after activity. So then they're just gonna be burned out. They want to hide in a room, and then it's counterintuitive, I would say.
And I know we have another question, but I just want to add to that. Darcy brought up something that I remember an organization saying, oh, our monthly all hands meeting is not going well. And I was like, well, what can you not do? And they did have the C-level executives addressing the audience. I'm like, well, if I can read it, then you don't need to say it. If we're in person, and I could have read that. Or even in trainings, if you're giving, if people are throwing around stats and facts, that I have a computer in my pocket. There's nothing you can really tell me that I can't know myself. There are things you can help me experience in person. So I would say it's, you know, again, I wasn't a full-time paid employee. I was a consultant. So I could say, C-level executives, you don't need to talk for the next 3 meetings. And they couldn't fire me because I already had my check. But you're in your organization, you can ask the larger question, what do we not have to do? What would be more engaging instead? Like, what is the intent of the executives sharing the overview of the year? Maybe you use that time to create a Q&A and they send in questions and the executives sit on a panel and they ask the questions that people submitted. So thinking about the real intent behind stuff and what you can cut out.
I want to double tap on the word joy too. The idea of just having the word joy, it goes beyond the work environment too. This is just general mental health and satisfaction in life. I think there's a really great correlation between people's mental health status and how much joy they're having in their life. So if corporate wellness is the overall goal of companies and organizations of building that retention and building that job satisfaction, if people can say they enjoy their work or enjoy their time with their colleagues, that's great. That's the winning statement of the year, right? So I recommend everyone play more. That's always something we try to build into our events anyway, is how much play can we have? Water balloon fights, water gun fights, things like that, all the fun stuff.
Play is profitable.
Exactly.
Title of your next book. Well, you have 2 books. I'll send you an invoice later. 2 books.
I love it. We did get a question from the audience. Speaking of games and play, what are some games that you guys would recommend for virtual settings? They've tried Jackbox, which I do love Jackbox. It's quite fun. I would put in there Amongst Us. If you guys ever played Among Us, it's kind of like a mafia or a werewolf. If you ever played that card game where there's like a murderer amongst the crowd and you have to figure out who the murderer is, that's a fun one. Any ideas from you guys?
I have one. I know Nini has a ton. I'll just, she facilitates them. I'll do a quick one. This takes a little bit more legwork on y'all's end. But have people, so I'll just set the stage, have people turn their camera off and go into their house and ask them to pick an item that is incredibly important to them. And then they come back and you can put them into a room with like 5 people in each room, and then have them share their item, why it's important, and then tell them that they're all on a desert island together and they have to get off using the items that they have. So not only does that help people sort of share with one another a little bit about their own life, you also help them kind of bond in solving a problem together in how they have to get off of this island together using maybe a crystal and a dog and their kid and a piece of steak in their fridge, whatever it might be. So again, you can start to see people's personalities, but also have this pretty interesting challenge, which behavioral science tells us when people don't know each other very well and they have to solve a challenge together, people bond, they feel in community, and they feel like they belong. So again, the research supports why those kind of games are really important.
Challenge. I use this word, intentional conflict sometimes in our events, where we'll kind of fabricate like a food issue, or not necessarily anything dangerous by any means, but that way there's a problem to be solved as a group. And I think you nailed it. Something I wrote about recently was this idea of community as method, and the community of everyone sharing the intention, sharing the space, sharing the objective of overcoming this or the goal of overcoming this objective is what really brings people together.
I'm going to let Nini have this one. I know that this is Nini's place, so go for it. Go for it. I'm just going to sit back and take notes. Go for it, Nini.
I was like, I'm just figuring out, like, where do I even start? There's like so many games popping up in my head. But yeah, like, I think there are different approaches, as you've already mentioned. Like, one is like really help them to overcome a challenge together and celebrate like an achievement in a playful way. So I use a bunch of like, amazing race around the world, where they like go to different countries and have to solve like different challenges, different mini games in those countries to then make it to the next country and then play against the other teams. Then there's also something more like intellectual, where they actually have this like quiz game together and they need to solve like different like intellectual challenges, escape rooms. That's all like for the entertainment side and the fun. and escape rooms, like solving different like mazes, unlocking doors, stuff like that, which is really entertaining and fun. Then, not gonna lie, I'm personally biased because I created like the iConnect spinning wheel, which is pretty much like a virtual coffee chat, but it's like a spinning wheel with 200 corporate friendly questions, the ones that just mentioned. So this is a way of like engaging your team, like more in terms of connecting on a deeper level. So instead of like challenging or achievement, it really addresses the need of like feeling connected. It tackles like honestly the number one issue for remote workers, which is in fact like loneliness at the workplace, like unplugging and loneliness. So I kind of created like this digital detox game. It's meant to like help people get off technology and like connect with real humans. So I think that's like a very important factor, and it comes back to everything we've just discussed earlier, like humanize the experience, give them a sense of like achievement, fulfillment, and really tackle one of their most important needs. And when it's connection, find something that solves that in a playful way. When it's like a lack of like achievement or fun, find something that brings back the fun and flow. And the other thing is like, especially when it comes to like introverts and like people that are normally not really being seen or heard or intentionally like trying to hold back, give them a stage, like make sure they feel seen, they feel heard, let them be the expert. I think Darcy mentioned it earlier, and I do that a lot in my team building as well. Like let them prepare like a 5-minute presentation about like their like deepest interest, and maybe like collecting buttons or stamps or whatever it is, but that let them shine in their genius area and their like field of expertise, which is not work related, like really like very unique hobby or something they share, and like, you know, give them an outlet to let them express themselves and like show their raw, authentic, vulnerable self in that sense, and like just humanize that experience and use it in a playful way. And many more ideas.
Yeah, I mean, I love the question just asking. You know, it's an icebreaker question. It's you know, what do you like to do for fun? And that's a way to start to get an idea of what are people's interests and whatnot. So we have another question here. How to have an engagement activity when your staff is virtual and leaders need to perform the activity themselves? I'm not really sure if I understand that question. Alina, do you want to elaborate on that question a little more?
Is it leaders need to facilitate the activity or they need to participate in it?
Yeah, good one.
Let's go with if they need to facilitate the activity.
Should be idiot proof.
Well, I would go ahead, Nini. Sorry.
Well, yeah, it should be like easy to implement for them. It's like make sure it's like understandable. Again, I'm repeating myself, but it's addressing a certain need. But I think we just need a little bit more clarity on the question to make sure we can answer it accordingly.
Yeah, and I would say if the leaders need to facilitate the activity, you want to build in time for them to practice. I know, especially sometimes there are high-level executives who you feel like they need to humanize themselves, so you want them to facilitate. And sometimes they actually want to participate. Either way, they're usually not trained facilitators. So anyone can learn to facilitate well. So if you're the person choreographing the activity, the whole entire session, what I would say is, you know, 3 months or 6 months before, say, you know, executive A, on Monday, December blah, we're going to have a practice session. And on Thursday, January blah, we're going to have a practice. Build that in and then facilitate the practice. And then after the first practice, they're going to realize that they need to work out the choreography. So if they're facilitating, that's what I've done to help it go easier.
Yeah, I mean, I think it just comes down to just like you set your teams up for success for work, you've got to set the facilitator up for success if that's not their kind of core zone of genius.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, give them like a step-by-step guide, like depending on how complex the facilitation is, but either give them like a quick video training through like either like on a live call or just on Loom, where you can just, you know, put in the slides and like guide them through the presentation, or just set up like a document where you like literally guide them step by step through the different steps. I think that really helps.
Yeah, practice, 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 rehearsal. It's something that people develop over time, especially in facilitating, public speaking. It's all these fun things that I think leaders do develop anyway, but reframing it towards, the engaging side. This is where I think you mentioned something about the introvert versus the extrovert, and there's always going to be the first person to speak, the first person to play. But what about the person that's a little more hesitant? And I think a good facilitator knows how to bring everyone into the fold. So let's do one more question here to take us home. How do you stay original and diverse when you're organizing virtual events? We all know that generally virtual events have kind of fallen off. The world's opened up. The virtual happy hour isn't so popular anymore. But if we're remote, we still need to have something. So how do you suggest coming up with new ideas and staying original? Yeah. And this is an open question.
I mean, the biggest thing for me is know your culture. Know your culture. Do you have any artifacts? Is there like a mascot for your culture? Are there certain phrase words? Are there certain kind of things that have sort of carried on, like the stories? If you're in a larger company, I'm sure you've heard the founder story a million times, but sometimes new employees haven't heard that. Can you build the event around that founder story? Can you build the event around this cultural artifact, a legend, something that is repeated in your company? And that not only keeps your event original, it also ties people back to who you are and engages them in who you are. So I think that that's a really important thing. I'll give a quick example here. Our company was really big on celebrations, and the fact that we'd been around for 7 years. And so we threw a birthday party every year. So we designed an event. We did cake wars virtually. So everybody made a cake at home asynchronously. Didn't matter what time they made it, came together on a call if they could be on the call. We judged the cakes, or we did it asynchronously after. So thinking about, okay, that was an event that really brought in the culture of the company. It celebrated the birthday, the ritual, kind of that story and legend of that being an important thing. It gave people the autonomy to go bake and be creative on their own and then come together to feel like they belong. So thinking again about, can you anchor each event, each original event in your culture, in something that's important to your company to keep that red thread, versus let's throw a happy hour on top of this. How about we build it from the inside out? So that would be my biggest takeaway there.
Yeah, 100%. I would say, like, if you want to be original, like, stay true to your company culture. Be in alignment. Practice what you preach. Don't pick up trends from other companies, because maybe what suits them is not the best match for your culture. If everyone is going to Burning Man, but that's just not in alignment with your company culture, don't enforce. I mean, I'd be the first one to go, but don't enforce that on your team if that's not what your company culture stands for. Like, be authentic in that. Listen. Make sure it's not like, again, like a one-fits-all solution, but it's really like tailored to what your team needs at this specific moment. And also never stop exploring. I feel like we're kind of, lean back when we have like our 5-6 best sellers that work every time, and that so far produce the biggest engagement, but never stop exploring. There's so many amazing new games and platforms, and everything is like constantly evolving and shifting, especially in the remote world. I feel like this is just, we're at the beginning of shaping the future of work. So many things are coming up and trending. So really, like, inform yourself on LinkedIn, read articles, like figure out what's trending, what's new, and then figure out what's the best match for your team.
Yeah, and I would add to that, the talent is probably on your teams. I remember at Cirque when we were developing the corporate leadership training program, there is a receptionist, and I was like, wow, you are extremely exuberant. Do you? And she's like, oh yeah, actually I was a dancer and I was a host on a cruise ship, and she became one of our top facilitators. We always brought her in when we had the highest stakes clients. And you wouldn't think like, oh, she's a receptionist, really great job, excellent, she did excellent work. But finding that talent on your team. So if you survey the team and say, there may be people who have really great ideas or have done this type of thing before. So ask your team for the original ideas, and they will come up with the ideas. And then find the person who is really exuberant about executing those ideas and hand over the baton or share the baton. Maybe they need some training and practice, but share that baton because it's probably internal to your organization. And if it's not, Darcy and Nini and Nomadic Six and I can help you out. So if it's not on your team, you can get that talent and import it for a day or a virtual session.
Another thing that I can recommend on that is like integrate a Slack channel. Like make sure you set up a Slack channel that actually is like a specific Slack channel where people can just drop their ideas. You know, if they come up with the craziest ideas, like give them an outlet where they can like collect all of their ideas, as to make sure nothing ever gets lost, because otherwise we only check in, let's say, you know, once a quarter to figure out like, oh, what's currently trending, anyone interested in like hosting a workshop. But honestly, I've had it in my bucket list workshops that suddenly someone starts performing a song in Aboriginal language that was for like an Australian company and stuff like that. They were like, wow, I never knew that about you. So give them one centered channel where they can collect all of these ideas like throughout the year, not just like once in a meeting, kind of like come up with your idea now or just remain silent forever. Like give them a platform where they can constantly like post and push and share ideas.
A virtual talent night. That's interesting. I haven't heard that one before, but that could be fun. Well, I think we're about ready to wrap up. Any closing thoughts? Anything you guys want to share before we call it a day here? And my power potentially comes back at some point today. Who knows?
I mean, I think that the thread that I keep hearing from Jay and Nini, and I believe it as well, is your people have all the answers. And sometimes it's as simple as asking and soliciting, and doesn't mean you have to do everything, but yeah, you have really smart, amazing people on your team. And one of your jobs as event planners and kind of organizing these events is understanding what people want. And the more you understand that, the better experience everybody's going to have.
I second it. Yeah.
Sorry.
Second.
I second it. That's all I got to say. Yeah.
Well,
treat them as like
I'm sorry.
and not doings. I think that's the secret.
Say that again. I think I cut you off.
I said like treat them as human beings and not as human doings. Like see them, like, you know, recognize them as an individual.
We got one more question here. When do you host virtual events? Generally after 5, and I think this goes for other events too. After 5 is really hard to get people to do virtual stuff.
I'm really strong in integrating it in your actual work time because it is an investment in your productivity. So make sure it's like during your mandatory work time and it's not like, you know, like voluntary free time, because then people won't show up. And it is indeed like an investment in your team, in yourself, and also especially when you pay for like an external facilitator, that's your return on investment. It's like the impact it has on your team. So don't do it on Friday after 5 p.m. if you want to get like the most out of it. Like do it on a Wednesday morning at 10 a.m. and make sure they're like showing up with their fresh morning energy. They're being switched on, having their first morning coffee, and then they're ready to connect, have fun, and play. And not when they're already depleted all their energies and their batteries on their to-do list of the day.
And I think one more thing that you can do if this fits with your company cadence is if you have an all hands weekly, replace one of your all hands monthly. Out of those, 1 out of the 4 is your virtual event. So again, it's on the calendar. People are planning around it. It's considered an integral part of your company culture and not an other than. And then do that all hands async, or have your teams just do an async update that week. And so again, really, I think that's probably the biggest problem people run into, that it feels like an other than. So really try to integrate it in something you already have, and that will create a lot more adoption in the event.
And I would add to that, the last thing, and we've done this a lot, is it's not just when you host the event, it's how you introduce the event. So if you just plop it onto people's calendar or send a one sheet, then that's not as exciting as recording a video about why the event is important or what's going to happen at the event. So what we've done is do a question and answer with if you have an outside facilitator, if there's an inside facilitator, to giving them an overview of the event, images of where the event's going to be. It's easy to throw something together on Canva. So if you can do a 3 to 5 minute introductory video and send that out, the time is important because after 5 people are back with their families and they're turned off. But if it's inside of the day to get some adoption, as Darcy said, you do also want to consider how you're introducing that event into the culture.
Well, guys, I will say this is probably the top of our hour here. Thank you so much for joining. To the guests and to the speakers, Darcy, Jay, Nini, you guys are absolute legends. You are a wealth of knowledge, and I love chatting with you every chance we get. If you're looking for any help planning your company offsites, your company retreats, is that synonymous? Before we retreats and offsites, are these the same word, or can we agree that one's better than the other?
Different. They're different. We can talk about that later. Different.
That's
Add an on-site in there.
On-site, off-site, or retreat. Yes.
Gotcha. So we are going to be coming back next year with new panels, new panelists, new topics. You might see these guys again. You might see the guys in the past, some new people. Lots of fun stuff coming up. So stay tuned. Enjoy the holidays and Happy New Year.
Happy New Year, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Thanks,
Bye.
y'all.